January, Donald Trump is first warned of the virus. He ignores it.
We have it totally under control. It's going to be just fine.
Defends the Chinese government instead. January 30th, Trump's own cabinet secretary warns of a pandemic, raising concerns that the Chinese government isn't being transparent. Trump calls him an alarmist.
We think we have it very well under control. We're working very closely with China and other countries, and we think it's going to have a very good ending for us.
The next day, the Dow plummets 600 points. Desperate to protect the stock market from sliding further, Trump continues to deny the threat and praise the Chinese government.
We're doing great in our country. China, I spoke with President Xi, and they're working very, very hard, and I think it's going to all work out fine. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away.
But global cases more than double, spreading to over 24 countries. February 25th, one of the CDC's top experts, Nancy Messonnier, speaks out, warning it could soon become a full-scale pandemic.
Disruption to everyday life may be severe, and I told my children that while I didn't think that they were at risk right now, we as a family need to be preparing for significant disruption of our lives.
Mr. Trump was, quote, furious as he watched the stock market crash after her comments. Trump didn't want to upset the markets. So for the last 5 days of February, the Trump administration took to the airwaves to deny the truth.
We have contained this, I won't say airtight, but pretty close to airtight.
Thanks to the president and this team's aggressive containment efforts, this disease, as Dr. Shukin said, is contained.
February 27th, the market sees through the denials. The Dow continues to plunge, but Trump keeps up the false message.
It will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. I think we're going to get through it very well.
April turns into May. The virus doesn't disappear. There is no miracle. The cases mount. The death toll grows. More than 33 million Americans lose their jobs to the pandemic. Unemployment reaches Great Depression-era levels. Donald Trump doesn't understand. We have an economic crisis because we have a public health crisis. And we have a public health crisis because he refused to act. Donald Trump didn't build a great economy. His failure to lead destroyed one.
John Eilman,
wow.
We saw the recount put together Donald Trump's own words. We now see the Joe Biden campaign putting together Donald Trump's own words. And usually, the old saying goes, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. You would think that after all of the president's misstatements and lies in January and February and the beginning of March, he'd stop digging. And yet he comes out again yesterday, digs himself a deeper hole. Now only about 1 in 3 Americans believe what he says about the worst crisis in American history since World War II, which means about 2/3 of Americans think he's lying. That's not a very strong way to go into a presidential election campaign.
Well, yeah, to Willie's point, it's amazing that even, you've got this 10-point delta in that poll, that CNN poll, between where he is with his approval rating, which has been, kind of in the general range of where Trump has been for all of his time in office, and the number of people who believe him on this issue. And I think, that to me is a leading indicator of where his polling is going to be going in the weeks ahead, right? Because there's not a question, I think, in anyone's mind, and you can see that Trump accepts this premise implicitly. He's been asked to address it several times in the last couple of weeks. Is this election going to be a referendum on your leadership on the fight against coronavirus? And he's hemmed and hawed at various times, but he more or less has eventually said, well, I hope it's not just on that. He said to David Muir last week, but we've done a great job. It's kind of amorphous, He doesn't have even a decent answer to that. It's almost like Ted Kennedy and Roger Mudd, the version of that. You ask someone running for president why they want to be president. You ask a president, what he wants to be judged on, and you hear him. He gets that this is, even though he won't quite acknowledge it or own up to it, he gets that this is the central issue of this campaign coming forward. And to have on the central issue this 10-point delta between his approval rating and what people think about him on that central issue suggests a lot of peril for Donald Trump going forward, because that's where the erosion is going to come if this crisis continues to worsen as every indication suggests it will under his current policies. Is the erosion is right there. It's waiting for him. That 10-point drop from the mid-40s to the mid-30s, there's a bunch of people who think he's not telling the truth about the central issue of the election. Their support is not solid. And that's the thing that puts him in so much jeopardy heading towards November.
This judge is giving us unfair rulings. Now I say why. Well, I'm building a wall, okay? And it's a wall between Mexico, not another country.
But he's not from Mexico.
In my opinion,
he's from Indiana.
He is his Mexican heritage, and he's very proud of it. Maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
Donald Trump in 2016 and yesterday from the White House podium.
That the president right now, in the midst of this crisis, is visibly struggling. There is something wrong, or he's just not doing okay. I don't know. But the president apparently just is not able to keep it together right now in his public appearances. And whether or not we were in a time of crisis, and we are, that seems like the sort of thing that we Americans should just all be aware of.
Said many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world, and maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay, anybody else? Please, go ahead in the back, please.
I have two questions.
No, it's okay.
But you pointed to me. I have two questions, Mr. President.
Next, please.
But you called on me.
I did, and you didn't respond, and now I'm calling on the young lady in the back, please.
I just wanted to let my colleague finish, but can I ask you
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
What is wrong with the president today? We don't know. I mean, something's wrong. I mean, whether or not you like the president or not, whether you enjoy his public affect or not on a regular basis, it's clear that there's something wrong. And that's important whenever the president of the United States is visibly unwound like that. And it is possible that it is just stress. Publicly and politically, the White House and the president are pushing this line now that the epidemic is in the past, and the president has been even cheering on the protesters who are protesting stay-at-home orders and gathering in big groups and not wearing masks and saying everything should be open. But alongside that public position, inside his house, in the place where he now lives and works, there's an outbreak now. That has put all the senior leadership of the White House coronavirus task force into varying degrees of quarantine. It apparently put the vice president into isolation at home over the weekend, as reported by Bloomberg News, before the White House then belatedly denied that reporting, and then the vice president came back to the White House today, bravely wearing no mask. The president's personal valet, the vice president's communications director, I mean, people in the White House are testing positive now. And the White House, by and large, has not been having people work from home. The White House has regularly been having congregate meetings, including meetings involving the president and the vice president. The White House has not been engaging in much, if any, social distancing efforts in terms of the way people are working. Almost no one has been wearing masks inside the White House as a workplace. And so, you know, maybe the president is just stressed out at the virus he has been playing down, this thing he's so invested politically in telling Americans that they shouldn't worry about contracting it anymore. It's inside his house now. CNN reporting that a person who spoke with the president this weekend said that President Trump, quote, voiced frustration that 2 White House staffers tested positive, and he has asked why his valets weren't ordered to wear masks before this week. The president has told people, reportedly, that he does not want to be near anyone who hasn't been tested and has bristled when coming into contact with some people at the White House. I mean, imagine being terrified and furious about the virus closing in on you in your home, while publicly, every day, you're railing about how great you've done at keeping everybody safe from this virus and how nobody should have to worry about getting it anymore and everything should open back up. So we'll all come back into contact with innumerable people who may or may not have it, who may or may not have been tested. I mean, there is a very divorced duality there, and it feels like the president is not handling this duality very well. His seams are very much showing. And, you know, we are over 1.3 million cases in the United States now. Over 80,000 Americans have died. Those astronomical numbers, which, of course, are relentlessly growing every day, they have just sort of slid off the president without even once appearing to perturb him. But he does appear perturbed now. He does appear unsettled. He did unceremoniously abort a White House news conference today in the middle of being unable to handle questions from female reporters. He just walked away and nobody knew what was going on. And part of it may be that he's just confused. At the White House on Friday, answering questions about people starting to test positive inside the White House, the president appeared legitimately baffled that a person could test negative, and then on a subsequent day, that person could test positive. He said that he doesn't understand how the vice president's communications director could have previously been negative and now she's positive. I mean, how does that even work? I mean, that alone is worrying for us as a country, not just because it indicates that there's something simple about the crisis that we're in that the president doesn't understand. I think we're used to that dynamic by now. What is worrying is that the president may very well decide that if testing people in the White House is what has turned up this bad news, that there are people in the White House who have the virus. I mean, the worry is that the president will now decide that testing is bad and it shouldn't be done since it was testing that produced this bad news for him. And he doesn't like bad news. I mean, I'm not joking. I wish I were. But the president's mind really does appear to work in spirals like this. And so I hope someone is strategizing in the White House about how to keep the president from concluding that testing is bad, now that people in the White House are getting what the president is literally calling bad test results, meaning they are testing positive. He doesn't like bad test results, so he doesn't like testing. And so what's going to happen to national access to testing, which is already atrocious? Part of me can't believe that we have to think about things in these terms, but part of me has also watched this president work for the past 3+ years and understands that's how he thinks.
In early January, the warnings began going through the Trump administration, the State Department, CDC, FDA, the Pentagon, the intel community. HHS. I could continue in early January. And yet the president's still claiming he shouldn't have done anything because there were no deaths yet in the United States. You plan for the hurricane when it's offshore, not after everybody's dying. But you know, Gene, these lies, one after another yesterday. And again, where are the fainting couches for the people that are upset about an edited Jimmy Kimmel video? They were shocked about that, which I actually, being dad, I was running around, saw it, retweeted it, then I unretweeted it and apologized. But they were so shocked about that. That was the end of the republic.
Oh, my Lord.
How
Definitely.
can we survive with these lies from late-night hosts being retweeted by cable news hosts? How can the republic stand? And yet yesterday, Donald Trump lied repeatedly. Said the most important matrix we have, or the number of deaths per 100,000, and that we're number one. Except, no, as John Hopkins says, we're 131 out of 140. So if that's the most important matrix, Gene, we're doing a pretty bad job. I guess I wanted to think, and I know you're saying Joe has to have at least one more thing to say. Well, Gene, you're right, I do. Dr. Fauci.
I do it.
He's coming forward with guidelines today.
Yeah.
And he's coming forward with Donald Trump's guidelines. He's coming forward with the White House guidelines. And we had Zeke talk about it. Let me just share real quickly. Then I promise I'm going to throw the football to you and let you run as long as you want. But Dr. Fauci, among his recommendations and among Donald Trump, these are Donald Trump's recommendations, by the way, conspiracy theorists out there who think that Dr. Fauci is somehow profiting off of this, or Bill Gates is profiting off of this, and that libtards want to keep the government shut down. This, Donald Trump's plans to reopen America. And what's one of Donald Trump's guidelines to reopen America? States should have a downward trajectory of positive tests or a downward trajectory of documented cases of coronavirus over 2 weeks, says Donald Trump, while conducting robust contact tracing and sentinel surveillance testing, says Donald Trump, of asymptomatic people in vulnerable populations, such as nursing homes, says Donald Trump. So libtard Donald Trump is the one that is putting these recommendations out that Dr. Fauci is going to talk about today, that Trumpists on their fainting couches across America are freaking out about. They're Donald Trump's own guidelines. Let's see this, the White House plan, opening up America. You can almost, with that title, the former Republican me can almost hear Lee Greenwood singing in the background. Opening up America. I love Lee Greenwood, by the way. But Gene, these are the president's own guidelines that people are freaking out, taking military-style weapons to state legislators, screaming and threatening and attacking police officers, yelling in their face, threatening their lives, because these states actually took the president at his word, and they're trying to follow the White House guidelines. All right, Gene, I toss the football to you. This is a year of magical thinking continued, isn't it?
It is magical thinking. It is continuing. And so let's, you talk about the president's own guidelines. Let's talk about the president's own house. The coronavirus has entered the president's own house. Katie Miller, Vice President Pence's spokeswoman, one of the president's personal valets. And so it is, of course, necessary to keep the White House functioning in this time, albeit, with the president who himself is non-functional and lies all the time, but you have to keep the White House going. And so they've engineered a way to do it, right? Everybody is going to get tested every day, and they have very quick, rapid contact tracing. So people who were in contact with Katie Miller got removed from Vice President Pence's plane immediately. I mean, and yet now the president is encouraging governors to open up workplaces across the country that have no such security measures, safety measures where they don't have enough tracing, testing, enough contact tracing, so let's ask the president about that. Of course, he would probably just lie. I mean, I like your hurricane metaphor, because what we have been doing, essentially, we did not board up the windows before the hurricane hit, and we should have. The first stirrings of wind, South Korea, for example, did board up the windows, and it's had a much better outcome than we've had. But we didn't do it, so we've been boarding up the windows, while the wind's blowing 100 miles an hour. That's what we've been trying to do, and as a result, we sustained a lot of damage, and so now we're supposed to. As the hurricane continues to rage, we're supposed to just stop. We finally maybe we're starting to bend the curve some. Maybe we could hope, and then we're supposed to give it up and just let the roof be blown off, I guess. It's astoundingly stupid, and as Dr. Fauci is expected to say, it's going to lead to needless death and suffering.
Well, and Willie, continuing this wonderful hurricane metaphor, the president was warned. This would be like the president knowing the hurricane was coming, and the president was warned repeatedly. Hurricane's coming. State Department warned him. Pentagon warned him. His intel community warned him. HHS director warned him.
So many warnings.
National Security Council warned him. Warned repeatedly, warned throughout January. I don't know if you knew this or not, Willie, but on January 22nd, the president said in Davos, we only have one person. Now, they came in from China. And, it's going away. We're going to be fine. We got it completely under control. Then, right after that, he talked about how great President Xi was. I don't know if you knew that. There's a lot of talk about China right now. The president, of course, making a racist comment to an American reporter, trying to somehow insult her because of her heritage, just like Judge Curiel. I don't know if you knew this. He said this on the 22nd, but a couple days later, President Trump said, he thanked President Xi, sort of bent over backwards, in fact, thanking President Xi, saying that that he was completely transparent, and China completely transparent. He's actually said China has been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. Donald Trump says the United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency, Donald Trump said. It will all work out well, Donald Trump said. In particular, on behalf of the American people, Donald Trump said, I want to thank President Xi. Well, that didn't happen. At the same time, he was kowtowing to President Xi. People in his own administration were trying to get President Xi's government to work with the United States so we could prepare for the oncoming hurricane. They refused to do it. President kept saying for another month, nothing to worry about. It's only 11 cases soon. It'll be down to 0. Said that in February. The hurricane kept getting closer to shore. In March, he said to Republican senators, you got nothing to worry about. He told African-American leaders, this is going to go away like magic. Nothing to worry about. Asked in March about it. At the same time, people on another network were saying this is the media's latest hoax to try to bring down Donald Trump. Donald Trump was saying at the same time, I'm not worried about it at all. He said that in March as the hurricane got closer and closer to shore, Willie, and everybody was warning him that this hurricane was going to hit. And even Navarro said 500,000 souls might be lost.
Yeah, to go back to January, the president was closing his eyes and wishing this away, and he's still doing it as of last night, as of yesterday at that press briefing. He also, by the way, was left by the Obama administration, written in 2016, a playbook for exactly what to do when this hit based on their experience with H1N1 and others. Despite what Mitch McConnell said yesterday, there was, in fact, a playbook so that when the first signs came from China and South Korea, the government would know where to begin. Meanwhile,
starters, the President of the United States stood in the Rose Garden today and accused his predecessor of committing a crime while offering no details or proof. And that wasn't even the lead story from the press conference today. If there was a bumper sticker quote to emerge from today's session about the climbing U.S. death toll, it was this, and we quote, "Don't ask me, ask China." Because, as others have theorized, unable to run for re-election on the economy or healthcare or leadership, the deflection to China already underway will be constant and a daily theme. At the start of today's event, the president declared, "We have met the moment and we have prevailed." When called out on that later on, the president said he was talking about testing. And today he staked his word on testing. These are the quotes. "Americans should be able to get a test right now. If somebody wants to get tested right now, they'll be able to get tested." While he stopped to add that not everybody should get a test in his estimation, he went back there again, quote, "If people want to get tested, they get tested." And that, we know, is just not true. About the economy, the president continues to bet on the third quarter of this year. He's billing it as the transition to greatness. And he said today, quote, "Greatness is going to be in the fourth quarter, but it's really going to be next year." Back in the real world tonight, we have lost 81,468 Americans to this virus, with well north of 1.3 million cases that we know of. The president claims, quote, "Numbers are looking much better, going down almost everywhere," which he then repeated this afternoon at the White House.
Our country's been incredible. And you see the numbers, they're dropping very substantially. The numbers are coming down very rapidly all throughout the country.
However, the New York Times finds at least 9 states, these 9, where cases are on the rise right now. NBC News reports an undisclosed White House task force report shows the virus spread in the heartland, far from the nation's coasts. As we mentioned, Trump appeared in the Rose Garden today to announce that his administration will distribute $11 billion to states to help ramp up testing. The money comes from funds already approved by Congress for coronavirus relief. As over 40 states are now in some stage of lifting restrictions, that'll be 48 by next weekend. Just over 2% of Americans have now been tested for this. According to the COVID tracking project, today nearly 400,000 people were tested. But again, in a nation of 330 million, give or take, experts up at Harvard have said the U.S. should be conducting at least 900,000 tests a day by May 15 to have a better idea of how this virus is spreading among us. Today, Trump repeated a claim he made 2 months ago about the availability of tests. It wasn't true when he said it 2 months ago, still isn't true today.
We've prevailed on testing.
You're now promising that everyone who needs a test will be able to get one at some point soon. When will that be a true statement exactly?
Well, it's a true statement already. As far as Americans getting a test, they should all be able to get a test right now. They should be able to get a test. If somebody wants to be tested right now, they'll be able to be tested. If people want to get tested, they get tested. We have the greatest capacity in the world. Not even close. If people want to get tested, they get tested.
But there was this clarification from a member of the task force.
Everybody who needs a test can get a test. If you are symptomatic with a respiratory illness, that is an indication for a test, and you can get a test. If you need to be contact traced, you can get a test.
Meanwhile, the White House is battling its own coronavirus outbreak, as you may know, after the president's valet and then the vice president's press secretary tested positive. Today, a number of staff members were wearing masks. You may recall the CDC recommendation that face coverings should be used. That was back in early April. Even son-in-law, senior advisor Jared Kushner was sporting one today. Today, Trump was asked about the decision.
Why haven't you required everyone at the White House to wear masks before now?
Well, if they're a certain distance from me or if they're a certain distance from each other, they do. In the case of me, I'm not close to anybody. Obviously, in my case, I'm very far away from everyone. Just about everybody I've seen today has worn a mask. Yeah.
Were you the one who required that, sir?
Yeah, I did. I required it.
Trump was also pressed on whether less stringent rules led to this White House outbreak.
Where did the system break down to allow that to happen?
I don't think the system broke down at all. One person tested positive, surprisingly, because the previous day tested negative. It can happen. It's the hidden enemy. Remember that. It's the hidden enemy. So things happen.
You say, Mr. President, to other companies who may look at this and say, I don't know if we're ready for all this.
Well, I think, we have a lot of people in the White House, and we had one. Basically, we had one person. I think we've controlled it very well. We have hundreds and hundreds of people a day pouring into the White House. So I think we're really doing a very good job in watching it, and I think it's very well contained, actually.
This is the second time the president has expressed surprise that you can test negative before testing positive. In addition to the 2 confirmed infections within Trump's circle, none of the medical experts were there today, in part because 3 task force members, Fauci, the CDC director Redfield, and the FDA director, Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hahn, are all in some form of self-quarantine after coming into contact with the White House staff who tested positive for the virus. They all plan to testify at a Senate Health Committee hearing tomorrow. That's being done by video conference. In fact, the committee chairman, Lamar Alexander, Republican of Tennessee, will also run the hearing remotely. He's in self-isolation after exposure to one of his own staff members who tested positive. Even with coronavirus now discovered in the West Wing, Trump's attention has been focused on a number of other issues besides the pandemic. Over the weekend, he posted a barrage of messages and attacks on social media. There were 125 of them over a 16-hour span, averaging one every 17.5 minutes on Mother's Day. Among them was this, accusing former President Barack Obama of committing, quote, the biggest political crime in American history by far. This afternoon, Phil Rucker of the Washington Post, who's standing by to join us in a moment, asked the president for an explanation.
What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. And I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody.
That's all we got today. There was another contentious exchange, one which brought the news conference to an abrupt end.
Said many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world. And maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay, anybody else? Please, go ahead in the back, please.
I have 2 questions.
No, it's okay.
But you pointed to me. I have 2 questions, Mr. President.
Next, please.
But you called on me.
I did, and you didn't respond, and now I'm calling on
Sorry, I just
the young lady in the back, please.
I just wanted to let my colleague finish, but can I ask you
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
what?